Today we are talking about strategy. And there's this quote by Lao Tzu: knowing others is intelligence, knowing yourself is true wisdom. Mastering others is strength, mastering yourself is true power. And so, really, the whole philosophy that I work from is that we want to know ourselves, that Greek maxim. We want to master the inner game so that then everything that comes externally is sort of grounded in our authenticity, grounded in the truth, the reality of who we are, rather than just being the forces, the conditioning of advertising and our mainstream media. So, the idea here is to really understand ourselves more deeply. So this series or this framework is state, story, strategy. So first is state. This is how we feel. It's our nervous system. It's the ground that we stand on. It is this present moment, the only moment that ever really matters, the one that's here and now. So first we regulate our state, and typically we do that through breathing, but specifically for putting our nervous system into a place where it feels safe, where it feels secure, and where we're not acting from desperation or scarcity or lack, but really from our authenticity, from our fullness. The second pillar is story. This is what you believe, the narrative that's constantly running underneath the surface. So it's like, who are you? It's very identity based. And so we talked about that 2 weeks ago, but the story is kind of just the understanding, the recognition of what is it that I am trying to fulfill? What is it that is creating my desires, and that is also creating my fears. So we have our state and our story, and then our third pillar is what we're going through today is the strategy. So this is what we actually do, how we actually execute. It's the actions, the systems, and the actual implementation of how we are moving through life. So state, we talked about this a little bit, but I love this quote that you don't rise to the level of your ambitions, you fall to the level of your nervous system. And that's a quote by Sam Ubbins, who says, you don't rise to the level of your ambitions, but you fall to the level of your systems. And I like adding nervous systems because there's a homeostasis. There's a place where we feel safe, where we feel good, and our nervous system, our bodies are constantly bringing us back into that place. And so when we move through life, when we expand through life, move into a different identity, a different home, a different job, it's uncomfortable. But if we can bring some sort of familiarity to that place, then we're more able to adapt there and not freeze up, not go into that fight or flight mode, but really be in this regulated space where we can orient, be connected with our environment, and move forward with intention. So really the pillars, just to review here, is really using breath work, having awareness of your different polyvagal states, the different nervous system levels, which is like dorsal, sympathetic, and ventral. And then finally, somatic practice. Somatic means really understanding your body. So just a quick little review. State is basically the foundation. It's where you feel safe. Next, we have the story. So state creates the space, and then story is sort of this, like the psyche, the identity. So it's the belief system that's running the show. And we like to basically choose a story in our life, and this is sort of like the self-talk. Choose a self-talk, the story that is empowering, that is moving you towards your best self. Because there's all these different stories from our society, from our parents, from our friends, from the advertising industry. But how much time do you actually spend self-programming, choosing your own story? And so this pillar is really about being intentional about what is your hero's journey. What is the dragon that you're slaying? What is the story that that is currently running your life? Because we all have a story, whether we're conscious of it or not. So let's choose one that actually aligns with our values and our principles. And then we have strategy. So strategy is today's focus, and it is the execution engine. Strategy is kind of the aligned actions that we take. It's built upon state and story, and strategy is sort of the way that we actually come into the world. And we can talk about strategy on multiple different levels. What is the strategy for this specific call? What is the strategy for this day, this year, my lifetime as a whole? But I like to really focus in on this call on our lifetime as a whole, which essentially comes from each day that we have. And so we're going to focus on the morning, the deep work, and the evening. So what you do every morning, what you do every evening, and then what you do when you're really at service, when you're really giving your work, whether that's through your entrepreneurship project, whether that's through working for some bigger company, whether that's doing some work for your family, whatever it may be. But strategy is essentially the aligned actions that we take that really bring us into this world. So I have always had this sort of like tension between, well, I'm creative, but I'm also rational, and how do I like bridge that gap? Constraints expand possibility. And there's a very practical way to think of this. So a chessboard, it's an 8x8 board, there's 32 pieces, it's a very defined space, closed system. And there's this number called the Shannon number. This mathematician, Shannon, he basically came up with this number, that 10 to the power of 120, that's the possible number of chess games. However, scientists have independently shown that they have estimated that there are 10 to the 80th power of atoms in the observable universe. And so while we think that this chessboard is just very defined space, when we actually define that space, it actually expands the realm of possibilities. And so creativity and rationalism or structure, they're not clashing, they work together. So when we add constraints to our life, to some aspect of our life, then we're able to more fully flow, more fully access the infinity and bring it down into practicality. So this is just like an example of showing that when we implement some sort of strategy, some sort of structure into our lives, it's not limiting us. It's actually expanding the possibilities, the capabilities of what we're able to do in that space that we have already committed to. So everything is created twice. This comes from the ancient philosophers, that everything is created twice, first in imagination and then in the world. You think about building a house, right? First you visualize, I'm going to build this house, and then you have the blueprint, and then you have the actual house that you build. And I know that's 3 steps, but you could think of it as like, well, creating the blueprint or creating the house as a whole. But the whole idea here is that it always starts with the imagination. Your imagination is a superpower. With the rise of AI and everything, your imagination is a superpower. It's a skill that you can develop, and it is unique to your authentic humanity. So I really encourage you to develop your imagination, and that comes from this trust in our inner reality, from this space within, this trusting, this somatic awareness, and just this realization that we are so much more than just our physical bodies and just this material world. So, but this is just to say that the strategy rests on the pillars of this state and story. We need to have our state, we need to feel safe so that then we can choose. And then we choose a story that is empowering. And then from that empowered story, the strategy is then taking that and creating the systems that actually bring them into our life according to the values. And then that shows in the outer results of our business or of our relationships or of our health, the things that we can measure and see. So this is sort of more of a reaction to our inner world. And the breath, the beautiful thing about the breath is that it connects all 3. The breath is present in every layer, in the internal world, in the external world. It is the bridge between all of these places. So how do we actually create strategy? And this is specifically for your morning and evening routine. In working with my clients in my coaching business, I have found that this is very practical. Throughout my life, I've always been very interested in dialing in my morning and evening routine, and I like going through this 4 pillars. So when you're designing sort of what you do every morning, what you do every evening, I would attend to a physical aspect, an emotional aspect, a mental aspect, and a spiritual aspect. What you do right in the morning and what you do last thing at night, that signals to our brain, this is the most important thing of my life, because I need to do it first thing and I need to do it last thing. Most of us are looking at our phones first thing in the morning and last thing at night. And what does that signal to our brain is the most important thing? And I would say that that is kind of just attending to this emotional level of, and even a shallow emotional level of, I just want some stimulation or I just want to check in on my notifications. And it's like, okay, that is your morning routine, whether you're not conscious of it or whether it's intentional or not. That does form your routine and that does sort of then compile into your life. So, what I recommend and what I have found is that you start your day with something physical. You get up and you move your body. You do 20 jumping jacks, you do 10 push-ups, you do some shadow boxing. You just smile, even something like smiling. Just have a physical aspect where you're activating the energy a little bit. Then the emotional. You connect to your purpose. I love my gratitude practice, just saying out loud 3 things that I'm grateful for that really sets the emotional tone for my day. And then mentally, I remind myself, what is the story that I'm telling myself? I am empowering leaders to harmonize within, to create conscious ripples for all generations. Something empowering, something that your mind rationally can understand. Oh, that's why I'm showing up to these calls. That's why I'm doing these things that maybe aren't the most pleasant or a little discomfortable because I'm providing for my family or I'm building up my skills. And then the spiritual aspect is really connecting to something greater than yourself. So this is really like saying a prayer or recognizing that, like, you look at your dog and you see a part of yourself, you look at your family member and you recognize that you are not just here for yourself and you are not alone. That we are being guided, that there are forces greater than us, and that we are part of a greater sort of ecosystem of life here. So in the morning, these are very powerful. I would say I'll give 2 more little examples here. A great one is you go to the mirror and you tap on your chest and you say, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. And you keep looking yourself in the eye until you actually mean it. And that way you get the physical, you get the emotional of the love, you get the mental of like, I'm choosing to love myself, and then you get the spiritual of just the love itself. So that is a very quick little thing that you can do. Otherwise, I also recommend going out, looking at the daylight, doing some jumping jacks or some stretches, and then saying some gratitude and affirmations. That's also very powerful. So when you are sort of forming your morning and your evening routines, as well as what you do before you go into your deep work, these are 4 pillars that I would recommend you hone in on. And then life isn't perfect. There's a Eisenhower quote that says, planning is everything, but the plan is nothing. Life happens, right? And so what I recommend when you're creating these sort of like foundational strategies is that you have a minimum, you have a floor, right? So on the worst days when nothing is going according to plan, what is the minimum that you can do? I can take 3 breaths, 3 deep conscious breaths and say something that I'm grateful for. Even when you're depressed and your mother's in the hospital and everything bad happens, you can still do that. And then you have your maximum. This is like your ideal case, it's the ceiling. So when your energy is high, when you're feeling good about life, it's like, this is what you would ideally do. So I'm gonna go outside, have a full workout, have a breathwork session, a journal, a meditation. This is what you shoot for, but realistically, this is what keeps the consistency going. So when you're creating these sort of plans, having the min and the max, it helps us to keep the consistency, but still push us to live our best life. So I'm going to finish off here with a very popular quote. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. We have the ability to shift our lives. We have the ability to move towards fulfilling what we are called to do, what we came into this world to accomplish. And so by integrating the state, the story, and really the strategy, we can start to move in a conscious way, in an intentional way, to really fulfill that potential that we have according to ourselves, rather than just the manipulation of the outer world. So this is first principles for the human operating system. I love that you are human. Humans are awesome. Develop your skills of imagination, and I hope that you got some value from this state story strategy framework.